So, welcome again to the first episode of No Rules Berlin. Hey, Oljai, nice to see you.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Just walking in the streets of Berlin. And I thought the first episode is like why OpenAI GPT-3 is not delivering, actually. I'm playing around with the AI since now more than 4 weeks just to get it to work, and it doesn't work. And I guess it's interesting also because you're also working on AI application. And I must say it's way harder than I expected.
Okay. And where is it failing for you? What's the biggest pain points?
Yeah, like for me, I'm building like Noble, this Stack Overflow for no code, for this basically a question and answering site. And what is really strange about it is that whenever you get an answer and I want GPT-3 to help me find those, it has to be perfect. And where I'm failing right now with GPT-3 is to get really good answers. So I get okay answers, but the use case is to get perfect answers. And yeah, it's really struggling. And I noticed that copy AI that you also know is actually way easier on the application layer because people don't really care if the results are bad. They only care about the few good results. And that's where I am currently really disappointed because it seems to be so far away. So just giving an example, I downloaded YouTube and I indexed all the transcripts to find exactly the right video at the right time. And it takes me roughly 7 to 8 minutes on average to get to a good answer. But like I have no...
Oops, you're breaking up.
100 queries against OpenAI to get a good answer.
Yeah, in general, these language generation models, they are very cost expensive when it comes to cost or execution. But then also the thing, if you just compare to copy AI, your use cases are different when it comes to like precision, right? So you're trying to answer specifically a question. Hey, on Bubble, I want to add a Facebook login button or whatever, or might be even a more specific question, like how can I turn that button blue while the SDK is delivering out of the box a red button or whatever. So it's a very specific question where these GPT-3 similar models, they're suffering a little bit when it's very specific, I think. And the other thing is that copy AI, what comes out is the expectation is that I get something that is okay for me that I can continue writing. So I'm not starting from scratch. Let's say you want to post something on Instagram and you're asking it to give you a starting point with something that you can work with and then finish off the description itself. So the expected answer or output from copy AI is actually something that you have to rework or change a little bit anyway. I look at your use case where you need actually a perfect answer that you can present to your user and say, listen, if you want to do that, this is where you can find it and so on. So maybe the approach there's a better approach maybe like to find these answers. Maybe it is some different type of query combination, whatever, but not just a query against GPT-3 models.
Yeah, I'm right now really working. There's two things. Like number one is I'm accepting that the results are not that great. Let's call it this way. And I'm thinking about what are the tools and what are like the user interfaces I have to build in order to make it great. Because in the end of the day, like what is fascinating is I find the right answer. So an expert user who is putting enough energy in can go through the entire YouTube to find the answer for whatever specific questions. And it really works with the entire long tail. And so imagine the entire long tail of SEO being indexed with a video answer. I guess that's cool. But I'm right now really working on the user interface. What would it look like that you get the search time down, like from 10 minutes or 7 minutes to 30 seconds. But that's the one thing. And the other thing where I'm like really not that, because I put this show where I don't think it's ready for prime time yet. GPT-3 the neural network is so big that you can't really optimize it. So I wanted to have feedback loops in, like having feedback from the adaptations. I want to have control mechanisms like the upvote system. That's a good answer. And it doesn't work. Like you can't really adapt the model. And that's pretty crazy. So I guess they want to get to like a GPT-5 or whatever, where it's so good that in the end of the day, it just gives always a perfect answer. And so your use cases, and that's what you mentioned before, really might be the ones that are right now possible. And then there's a new wave of applications coming out when the thing is getting more precise.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I think that's probably right. The other thing, just to understand, just to figure out what to do now, because it's an option to just wait now and say, oh, GPT-3 is not what I need. I'm waiting for number 5, and then I will just wait for my startup or whatever. Instead, what could be a possible, way to navigate out of this, or like to get to a next level, or continue learning on what the product should be like, etc., while still using GPT-3? And maybe it is that you say GPT-3 in its current incarnation are good enough to give me candidates, and maybe one of these 10 candidates I get out is the right one, and then on top you put a layer that would, like you said, with a feedback loop of like thumbs up and down, or you may be expanding the initial search with certain terms and calculating probabilistic extension of these answers, whatever. Maybe it's a second step on top of these candidates that you would get out of the model, and then your feedback from your users might be then what makes it good for now. And then later you just keep the ball rolling. You continue learning about your product and how it would fit the market and in what shape, etc. And then when you get GPT-4, whatever the improvements are, then you can maybe switch to that and then make your additional layer on top lighter and lighter, and then somehow maybe even feed in your feedbacks that you collected into the query.
And also an alternative that I'm right now considering is like, let's take the weaknesses of GPT-3, but let's just say like it's getting 10x better every year in terms of performance. What could you invest right now in order to then be really ahead of the curve once it's getting better? And I see this more as a cost function. So I'm actually considering, okay, let's say I take 7 minutes for one answer, and it's an expert. So an expert costs whatever, like $300 per hour. And so imagine I would invest 10 million today, and I would have those like expert labeling tools where they actually answer the questions. But I know exactly that in 1 year, it's going to be it's 70 answers per hour. And in 3 years, it's going to be like 700 answers per hour. And so it might be that it's exactly the right time now to invest into like expert labeling tools on top of GPT-3. That's the other one. But what I was really wondering, like how strange the results are. It's crazy. Like it's really weird, this thing.
I mean, there are some not so well-known limitations of all these models. Misunderstanding of highly technical and specialized topics, misunderstanding of conceptual phrases, or like just a lack of semantic understanding. And also the whole thing about it's very short in memory, like it's a goldfish. Like you ask it one question, and then maybe the second question it has no clue. If the second question is connected to your first question, but it's not specific, like the way you phrase your question, it has no clue what you talked about before, basically. So there are a lot of limitations, and I remember there was some recent work from Facebook with this Blender bot 2.0, where they then extended that, and maybe this is also some inspiration for you, where they actually, I remember they had some kind of like query generator in front of all these models. Like before it even gets to the execution, they would look at the dialogue history, and then they would have a query generator first, and then they call these models or whatever they have afterwards. So there are some approaches in the wild where people just like to address that, because GPT-3 and all these other models, they are great milestones, but they need something on top to make it like actually useful. If you build a chatbot for your company's support, interface or whatever, it's not just that. It's not just GPT-3. It's always like something on top that makes it work in that context, or sometimes gives you additional query parameters, or extends the query, or changes in a certain fashion to make it so specific that then GPT-3 works and helps answering it. And then if you get from the feedback the customer that it was too often negative what came back from GPT-3 models or your system, then you can always then redirect to a human to help those few people that might not have very common questions, basically.
Like, where are you right now in terms of technology? Like, where do you think is the cutting edge, like for your tool, like television?
Yeah. So what I'm busy with right now is we just hit the point where we understood that we have to break out of the common tool set, meaning that we have to now invest into additional models that understand the aesthetics of movies and news videos and what have you. Like, for example, understanding what kind of shot type it is, like super close up, is it a medium shot, wide shot, what. Then in terms of like news, like we also do provide tools to generate news videos. We figured out that we have to invest in the vision models to understand what is a trash car, right? So after an accident, that this actually used to be a car, not anymore, because it just faced the wall and used to be. And then we need those insights, because whenever we look at the news text that was written by a journalist that we then convert into a news video, looking at the footage automatically and like associating right moments, we have to get a better understanding of what's happened and what's described in the raw footage. Some things like there's a police officer or some firefighter, whatever. But we also have to understand certain things like this is actually a wrecked car, like it used to be a car before the accident, and it's not just two wheels, which all these common models from Google and Amazon and Microsoft would tell you.
And how are you doing? Are you labeling, or how do you do it?
Yeah, exactly. So we're building models now that common sense models. It's not just understanding a regular car, but also a crash car, like trash car, or understanding the aesthetics of a documentary, that this is a above the shoulder shot, or like a master shot, because then once you capture that, you can feed that back into your model as an input to which does the storytelling or the storyboard generation, because if it doesn't understand that, it can basically use that to build the storyline, basically.
Fascinating.
So now, while all the other guys are figuring out, like playing around with these common sense models and training them themselves, which is a waste of time, we now figured out that there is certain limitations, A, B, C, and now we can invest in these limitations, unblock them, and then jump ahead even further.
And what do you think? How many people are getting that right now in this entertainment? I'm pretty sure Google understands that. Like,
yeah. I mean, of course, Google and Microsoft and AWS and all these guys understand it, but it's just too much of a niche product that they would probably never invest in. But it's still a big market. If you can address all these publishers and broadcasters and all these news websites and what have you, and enable them to produce great news clips and report like great videos about the new iPhone that came out with just like a snap of your fingers, and it costs like a fraction of the cost, then they would jump on it and they would just pay money for that. It becomes such a crucial tool to create great stories and what have you, but it's probably nothing that someone at Google would invest out of the box so much money because they want to jump exactly into the niche. But maybe in the future, I don't know. But right now, that's what and there's a lot of like traction from all these broadcasters and publishers and what have you, that they are like very interested in using that. But it's a niche that you can own. But from there, you can just, once you figure that out and can deliver to your customers, you can then broaden up. Like maybe one day we will create short stories. Maybe we create documentaries. Maybe we create a draft for your next blockbuster. And there's so many opportunities. If you then get to a step where you can take a script for a movie or something, and then use gun networks and tend to generate the frames, and you draw the storyline, or even create a video which does not look good, but it gives you, it plays through the whole story, and you just have to imagine then that you will have then at some point the actors and what have you, and maybe they even the actors would then be generated by CG. It's just crazy, but maybe that's where it's heading. But right now we're looking at how can we create these storyboards, and then from there we both are old enough to understand, like remember what Google used to look like in the past, and how it worked, and that we sometimes even jumped on page 2 and 3 for some very specific things, and now it's just so perfect. Like it's sometimes you don't have to even leave Google because it's answering you the questions on the like where in Google without leaving to the public internet.
Hey, what do you think is like what do you think happens in OpenAI GPT-3 the next 12 to 18 months? Do you think we will see some major breakthroughs? Or maybe Google comes and competes?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think what was interesting is this one thing from Facebook AI. I was recently shared with this bot that has long-term memory, etc. That was interesting. And also, I'm not sure if you heard about because GPT-3 is like limited to the public, but you have an API, but there's some sort of like exclusive licensing, Microsoft or something like that. And OpenAI stated something like, hey, it's so dangerous, we have to keep it closed source or whatever. And there's now these projects like the Neo or Neo X or whatever it's called, which is trying to build the same type of model like GPT-3, but open source. And I'm wondering what these developments, like also the things that Google shared at Google I/O, Facebook does in this open source world, basically, what kind of effect that will have to how OpenAI will deal with GPT-3 and its successors in the future. There will probably be some great breakthroughs in the future, whatever that will be. But I'm thinking like, how will they deal with this type of technology in the future, like these models and the source code and what have you? That's quite interesting. But yeah, but there will probably some breakthroughs, but maybe we get a great surprise at some point.
Yeah, like I personally believe what is interesting is that it got so quiet, kind of like about AI, self-driving and so on. But behind the scenes, there's so much progress. And what is crazy with those neural networks is, I guess, it's really like from one day to the other day, they switch on the light and it works. Because it's not like a linear process. Those things, the moment they get trained and then they get good and then they are perfect, you know. And I guess it's really, I guess one day we just wake up and the thing works. And we have self-driving cars and we have whatever, like language models that totally can write a novel that is a bestseller or whatever. Like the dreaming part, that's where I'm most bullish about. It could be like that because technology is so randomly strange. It could be one day you just wake up and it works, just like with AlphaFold protein folding. Suddenly it's there and it's solved forever.
Yeah, that's the crazy one. That will probably have some implications. That it's super interesting. But I think a couple of years ago, where I was making myself crazy, like it's super hard to at that pace follow all the developments and what have you, and just switch to, hey, this is what I do and this is what I need, and we can do some research on that and figure out what's the state of the art is available out of the box. Because at the end, the only thing that matters really to my business basically is, do we have what we need in order to enable these use cases and leverage technology? And if not, what's the developments? Or if we need to do something on our own, then we do. And don't get crazy about all these papers that are published, and because at the end, what percentage of these papers are actually being implemented and scaled and what have you? But on the other hand, of course, great to follow the stories and the news about the great breakthroughs at Google and Facebook and whatever company. But at the end, it's what really matters is like, what type of technologies do I need, and is there something that I need to level up, or could I leverage something new? Yeah, but I hope there will be some great breakthroughs, and it will be accessible to anyone.
Yes, we can wrap it up. Hey, Olja, that was super nice, and
yep.
And see you soon.
See you soon. Bye. Thanks.
Bye bye.